to the AFC Podcast. My name is Victoria Fragnito. Just as a reminder, you can watch us on YouTube. You can see Jim dance like he's doing right now. Or if you're only on YouTube. Or if you're not able to sit down and watch, you can also listen to us on the go on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Castbox.
Yes, and today we're going to have a fun podcast. We're going to have on 2 day players for the first time ever. We've only ever had one guest at a time, but now we're going to expand our horizons and have 2 guests by the names of Victoria de la Concha and Zoë Mann. They are co-hosts of a podcast, Young, Willing, Eager podcast, where they use online generators to come up with a few topics, a genre, and a few other small things, and then they come up with different script ideas and story ideas. It's a fun concept for their podcast and their show. So we want to have them on, talk to them about that and their film careers and everything else that they've got going on, as well as their film choice, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
That's 2+ hours of my life I'm not getting back.
Well, you rewatched it, so really,
yes.
4 or more hours. I've watched it way more times than you, to be honest. So that was part of my childhood growing up.
Yeah.
I think I was just old enough when I was a child to know how bad it was when I first saw it. And I was like, this is bad. I can't really pinpoint it because I'm like, 9. But this is because that movie came out in 2002, right?
Yes. So
I wasn't really old enough to analyze it at the time, but I watched it again when I was older, of course, and really picked it apart. But, these movies that are part of bigger franchises, it's tough because you have to connect it to other story elements of things that already exist. Like, we could talk about Marvel, we could talk about DC, we could talk about Star Wars. All these movies that already happened, if you make a movie that contradicts them, the fan base is just like, well, fuck you, because they're pretty hardcore. I'm a pretty hardcore fan, but I saw a funny video on the internet that kind of summed it up, where someone was like, oh, you're a fan of Star Wars, and they're like, yeah, I just don't like this movie, these characters, this movie, or this show, or this part of this show, or this series. It was like, so you really don't like Star Wars. It doesn't sound like you like Star Wars. It's like, I love Star Wars, but these are all the things I dislike. And it's like, tell me one thing you like about Star Wars. And he had to think. Like, the lightsabers are cool. And he couldn't think of a thing he liked about it, which is, I was watching it and I was like, this is accurate. Chewbacca's cool. I like Chewbacca.
Mm-hmm. I mean, growing up, I didn't, I had a weird exposure to Star Wars. We only had Return of the Jedi on VHS. That's the only one we had. So I thought that was Star Wars. I didn't, until then the remastered versions were re-released in theaters. So my mom took us to see them. Now, obviously they had added some CGI elements and stuff. They went a little far with the canteen singer in the newly remastered original ones. But I think all the other stuff, I remember watching an interview movie with an interview with George Lucas talking about the stuff that they were doing. They were talking about the limitations that they had back in the 70s and 80s when they made the original trilogy of when they're on Tatooine and they're speeding across to find R2-D2 in the speeder, and they had this weird yellow light film under the speeder, and it's the editing that they did to try and get rid of the wheels so it looked like it was floating. They fixed things like that, and I think that's a good use of CGI. But then you get into these new movies and he went overboard. He went so overboard with the CGI in the movies, and it
finally you know what, I finally can make these movies look like spaceships, and
but they looked like spaceships. I think, and that's my argument.
Is what it was, because in the older movies they didn't have the ability to do it all on the computer, so he made miniatures of these spaceships and stuff, and that was something that's so tedious and it's hard to direct, because once you sculpt something you can't go back to the sculptor and be like, this is a little weird, can we change this? It's
Yes, but I think that's the hard, like, that's hard work, yes. But you should do it because it turns out better. Like, as I think CGI is necessary and it's important to expand things that you just cannot do physically. But if you have the opportunity to do it physically, then it's real, and then it feels real when you're watching it. Through this whole movie, it was so, and these original ones, it was so CGI that you just don't feel connected. And I feel like with these bigger films, you do have a hard time as they continue and they go on. You have a hard time staying true to whatever you started with. But I think Star Wars had a harder time because there was such a big gap between the first ones and the prequels that came out in the early 2000s. Like
20 plus years.
Yeah, like when you go to the Marvel movies, it's not that long. They literally had a plan, and they just year after year, boom, 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 there's another movie out, another movie out, another movie out. Whereas I feel like, I don't know if George Lucas actually had a solid, like, planned out story for the beginning, like, of all of this. It doesn't seem like he did. It seems like he just wanted to come up with it after the fact. So instead of, like, having a solid idea, it's not as connected. Whereas, you know, with other bigger franchises, the timeline is smaller, and they also have source material to go off of. They have the comic books to go off of. They have stuff like that to base things off of. So, you know, it's big series movies are difficult. And my phone thinks I'm asking for Siri right now because
big series. I mean, I want to know when the decision was made, because at first, when the first Star Wars movie came out, it was just Star Wars. It wasn't Episode 4, you know? It was Star Wars. That was it.
Are you sure it wasn't Episode 4? I think it was always Episode 4, New Hope.
No, not like the first year, but I think once they decided to make the sequel, they were like, all right, well then this is just the middle of the road, because I think he had vague plans for what happened before. And I do that too. When I come up with a story, I try to come up with, like, what happened to lead up to this. And then sometimes it makes sense to come into the story at this certain point, and then continue from there. But it's good to know when, like what happens before your story or what happens after, so you can kind of gauge what you're telling during the screen time. So I'm pretty sure he had that. This is what I've heard or what I remember. I can tell you're looking it up to defy me.
Yeah.
You're defier. But it's quite possible that he had no idea what he was doing. And he was like, I made Darth Vader and I made laser swords good enough to run 9 movies. So, you can't deny that Star Wars is not one of the biggest franchises on the planet.
I mean, obviously it is.
Half of their films are hot doo-doo. But we can talk about, as much as we can talk about the bad things in Star Wars, we can talk about the good things, like The Mandalorian and all the cool spin-off movies they keep doing, the Clone Wars series. All, you know, even in the bad movies, there's a lot of good to talk about. So
there is. Well, let's see if these girls have a reason for putting us through this torture. Let's bring them on and talk to them a little bit and see what's happening.
Sounds like a plan. Let's bring on Zoe and Victoria, and we'll talk to them about their careers. First, let's show a little snippet from their podcast, and we'll go from there.
So the start a scene improv generator, that's what I'm doing. And our line is, shh, did you hear something? And our emotion is delighted.
Okay. The genre is comics/graphic novel. So my time to shine.
Yeah, seriously, I don't know a lot about graphic novels. So,
But you know, you've heard of superhero stuffs.
What's a superhero? No, I've never heard of that before.
Oh, man, Marvel's gonna come assassinate you.
I don't care. They should try. Okay, like hot take. I don't like Marvel movies.
Okay, we can still be friends. I'm just gonna. Whew. Okay, why?
Because I said so.
No, you have to. If you're gonna have a hot take, you have to have some sort
Because
of
that's my opinion, all right?
like back it up. Why?
All right, that was a little snippet from the Young, Willing, Eager podcast. We're here with Victoria de la Concha and Zoë Mann, the hosts of the podcast. So, first time we've had podcasters on the podcast, which is also fun. But you guys, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, how you got into the film industry and creative stuff. I guess this is the first time also we're doing two guests, two day players. So we'll start with Zoë, and then we'll go to Victoria, but then we'll talk about how you guys met as well and go from there.
Yeah. I'm from New York. I went to a performing arts high school, so I was always interested in, acting at first, and then made my way to writing. That's where I met Victoria at Loyola Marymount University, studying writing and producing for television, we're about to enter our second year, 2 weeks. I've always loved comedy. That's always been my main thing. I can't take myself seriously. So like in acting classes, every time I did like a Shakespeare thing, I just could never take it seriously. It was always me just messing up and doing something funny. Like I can make Chekhov funny in high school. My main goal is to own my own production company and to just help produce my friends' films and my films, or shows, anything, any projects, and with a comedy focus.
Very cool.
Isn't she so cute?
Yes.
I am, yes.
For myself, I feel like my journey into the entertainment industry started at a young age because my father, as a hobby, introduced me to what the world of screenwriting was. So I got to see a script at like an early age and think, wow, like I really am intrigued by this, but at the time I wanted to be an actress. So I think storytelling came in the form of like, high school plays or playing Sims for like 14 hours at a time. Mm-hmm. But eventually I went down a more like logical path and I studied broadcasting communication, which really gave me a love for storytelling. But I was a little like deflated when I couldn't add my own narrative. So I really shifted gears into screenwriting and filmmaking around the end of my undergrad college. And I spent 2 years after graduation, bopping around from like freelance production assistant roles at Marvel Entertainment and also Viacom, now Viacom CBS. And I realized that while set life was satisfying in some ways, I was just ready for the next step, which was to really write and produce my own things, which is when I found Loyola Marymount University's writing and producing for television program. Kind of perfect for me. That's where I met Zoë after I got in. I could just tell we had a vibe. We had this jokey kind of banter going on all the time. And from there, I hope to graduate with my MFA and really get into maybe like young adult narratives or anything that has a beautiful, like nerdy kind of science fiction-y fantasy feel is so up my alley. I think that's what got me through all those years of like just being that like weird girl who would, again, sit on the computer with Sims forever to like make my own stories in my own universe. So I hope I can give that kind of like safe, fun, escape feeling to like kids or young adults in the future.
Nice. That's
cool.
Awesome. So you guys also, yeah, please.
I would say for me, it wasn't Sims, but Zoo Tycoon. I spent hours on that, doing my own stories with like, animals.
I used to watch
over here.
Yes. So good.
Is Zoo Tycoon the one where you could like drop people into like the little shark pond and they would get eaten?
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I played
to
the
be
original
fair-
like Jurassic Park Tycoon or something.
Yes, where you could have the dinosaurs as well.
Yep.
To be fair, though, I think you can take any character in like Roller Coaster Tycoon, Zoo Tycoon, Sims, put them in water somewhere, and just like leave them there, and then the Grim Reaper shows up.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's pretty dark game, actually, surprisingly.
It was a vehicle for like those really dark storylines that like my 14-year-old heart could handle.
Yeah, I once married the Grim Reaper. Like, you can, like, if someone dies in your house, there's a way where you can have them just stay forever.
I remember I made my high school bully in The Sims, and then I tried to kill her with fire, but then I ended up burning my own sim to death. And I just took
Is that
a
like
deep breath.
metaphorical or what?
I was like,
Did that teach you a lesson?
No, I never learned how to stop being petty.
Wonderful. Well, so you two also, beyond killing Sims and doing that, you also have a podcast together, Young, Willing, Eager. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, during quarantine, we just really wanted to work on something together. And, like we have this really good banter. We are really close. And yeah, we also just are so passionate about storytelling and just being funny little freaks on the internet. So, so we decided, oh, there's my cat. Hello. And so we decided.
Guest spots with animals. That's
Yes, this is Harrison. Please do not go on my computer though. I am talking. Oh my gosh. So, what was I saying? Oh, so we love storytelling, and we decided that it would be really fun if we can make up a story on the spot, and just, we have a background in comedy and a little bit of improv. So we thought, why not? It'll just be fun. And it's been just a really fun way to spend the time.
Yeah. Quarantine would not have been the same without this little passion project. And I feel like it took a village to get it going. Like, we had awesome graphic designers, and we got custom music for the intro. Our site is like really coming together. So we're hoping that by the time you guys listen to this podcast, you'll see it's polished everything.
That's awesome. So what's actually like the format? How do you guys make up a story on the spot? What's the format of the show?
Yeah,
So
so we'll take a generator or two actually and try to get a sentence, a emotion, and a genre. And once we have those 3 criterias, we just set the clock for 20 minutes, and then we instantly try to jump at something, pull at straws, and I gotta say, it's a blast.
It's fun. It's like improv writing.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because when you're in a sorry, go ahead.
Oh, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, we had this TV writers room class at LMU, and it was all about, here's what you got to work with, and go ahead and make some ideas. Sometimes on the spot, sometimes not, but I feel more often than not, you just really gotta shoot for the stars when you're in the writer's room.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And also with comedy, it's so important to just not care. Like, just say the first joke that's on your mind. The worst thing that can happen is someone says it sucks, and then you move on. It's, or it might be the best joke ever. I think that having no fear in comedy and just, just going out there and not being afraid to hold back is important too. And it helps us with that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're writing, you can't pre-censor yourself before you put anything down on paper. If you do that, you're never going to write anything. So there are plenty of times when you write something that you think in your head, I don't know if this is actually going to work, and it ends up being like the best thing in your piece, whatever you're writing. So I love that you guys don't hold back with that stuff. That's great. Especially I feel like given a time limit, you really can't hold yourself back. You have to just kind of throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Do you guys have guests come on the show, or is it just you two?
Well, at the beginning, we didn't have guests, but we had some of our the other Black writers in our cohort at LMU send in log lines and organizations that they want people to support. And so at the end of, I think it's the first 3 episodes, we have 2 log lines by 2 students that are in our cohort. And then on our website, we have like all their information, the log lines, what they're working on, and again, any organizations they want to support. And so we were doing that. We're in talks of having guests. We want to definitely have that in the future because we just think it's just more fun with more people, you know, and we have such talented friends.
I thought it'd be really fun if we could get a comedian who's really good with improvising too, and just kind of roast our idea at the end.
Like, do you want him to do it while you guys are coming up with the idea, or do you want him to watch your episode and then roast it the whole time he's watching it?
I think, oh my God, the endless possibilities. I think if someone was constantly criticizing us as we were brainstorming, it'd be kind of shitty. So I think at the end, you know, then go at it. But the brainstorm period of any type of like writing thing should be a safe space, I think, at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with you on that one. You can't. Yeah, because then you're going to be questioning yourself the whole time, and you never know what's going to come out of those brainstorming sessions.
Yeah, a dumb idea might be dumb at first, and then someone puts something on top of it, and then it becomes a beautiful little sandwich.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think every idea starts out as a dumb idea, you know, until somebody just, you know, you keep working on it and it becomes awesome.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So beyond the podcast, did you have anything like in the works for before quarantine happened? Did you have any ideas, or are you just kind of focusing on school right now? Like Zoe, let's start with you. What was going through your head and plans that you had before the world ended?
Oh my God. Well, I was actually going to produce 2 projects this coming semester for 2 production students at LMU for like their, you know, the films that they have to make. But they canceled that, obviously, so I'm not doing that at the moment, which was sad because I really love working with production students and helping them with their scripts, but also just helping them get the project up and going. So that was working on that. Also, me and my other friend, Nikki, who is also a student at LMU in the same program, we just finished writing a pilot together. So we just finished that. And actually today we're going to start a new one. So we don't know what the second one is about yet, but we're going to have a brainstorming session today. So, you know, again, just trying to keep as creative as possible and also just trying to get as many scripts made as I can so I could just have a big portfolio when I graduate. That's just so important.
Nice. How many years is the grad program at LMU?
3.
3? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Pretty unusual for that kind of program, but
yeah,
they give you an extra year to get more internships, right?
Yeah, internships.
Oh my God.
I have a lot of strong feelings about internships, but Victoria, what were you thinking of doing over the summer, or did you have any like plans of projects, stuff that you wanted to work on?
So the quarantine actually really started to get real, like before our semester finished. So at the very start of it, I was still interning at Nickelodeon, which I loved. And it really inspired me to create a animated family adventure type of feature. So I have the first draft of that done. And I really do hope to one day develop it into a TV pilot. It's about this young girl who is, you know, kind of the typical middle school outcast. She's always stuck in a daydream, but that's because she literally can walk around in other people's dreams. And she keeps this a secret until there's a really traumatic kidnapping that takes away half of the kids in her grade. And it's up to her to kind of calm the community's nightmares and also find out where these missing children went. So I want to finish that. And then I also have wrapped up my time at Nickelodeon because of everything that happened. But now I'm shifting more into like adult drama or like young adult drama. There's this Coney Island time travel piece I'm working on with my writing partner, who is my dad, actually, the one who I mentioned earlier, who inspired this all. This young but grieving physics student decides to try to reverse her twin sister's death by attempting time travel. And while she actually is successful, she transports from Coney Island 2027 to Coney Island, 1907. So yeah, it was a very different look and feel back then. They had these 3 giant amusement parks that put Disney World to shame. And I'm obsessed with that period in time. So I'm so excited to develop it further this semester.
That's awesome. I feel like if there is a silver lining to quarantine, if some people have been able to kind of muster the motivation to finish projects that they've been putting off or start new ones or use that kind of as like a distraction from all this stuff. I know I've had a hard time. Some days I feel really motivated, some days I don't. But those days that you do, it feels really good to just kind of get creative stuff out on paper and to really develop these projects. And now we have the time to really focus on it.
Yes.
Are you, for LMU, you're a couple weeks out from your next semester? Are you guys going to be back on campus or is it virtual learning?
It's all virtual. Yay.
I know, it feels like it's been forever, but since we at least had some experience with it towards the tail end of last semester, I feel like it might be different. It might be better.
Yeah. Well, do you guys have any classes that you're worried might not work so well virtually?
Not really. I mean, since we're screenwriting students, I think that's kind of just the blessing of being a writer is that you can write anywhere, and so these classes are going to just be like this Zoom where, we just all talk about each other's work. I mean, the reason why I'm not a huge fan of virtual learning is because I love, being able to just read people in the room and, I'm a very personable person. It's just really difficult for me to do that over Zoom, even though I understand I want to be healthy. I don't think we should be back in school, but it is a shame to me. But I think that if this is a new normal, in quotes, that it's a good learning experience if we're getting into the industry and if this is something that's going to be, I don't know, something we have to do more in the future.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to piggyback off that and say it's not that the classes won't work. It's that those connections you build with people by helping them out on a set or running into them in the halls is just going to be a little bit more strained. But if you're someone who's willing to reach out and make the effort to connect with me, like I'm always down, even if we're just doing like a virtual coffee.
Yeah. That's good. It's good to have that positive attitude going into it. And I do think, being writing students, you guys have kind of a leg up on this whole virtual learning thing, rather than I know my college that I went to my undergrad, they are going back to school now. And I'm just interested in how on earth they're going to do acting classes on campus, socially distanced. Like I wish them all the best, but I can't imagine. And then they did all last semester like virtual, so I don't know.
It's crazy. Yeah, I know for production students at my school, we had like guidelines since we thought we were going to be back in school and doing productions. And one of the things for actors is that they have to be 6 feet apart. It's like, well, what scene is that?
Like every prompt is like, you're disgusted by your partner. You can't even get near them. You hate their guts.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to act like COVID exists. So it is an acting challenge, weirdly enough, because you have to pretend that it's real, because it is.
You're so right,
and
Jim.
Life's a nightmare, yes.
I have another question about your ideas that you guys come up with on the podcast, because while it's a really fun idea to come up with all these ideas and different storylines, are you guys ever planning on developing any of them, or are you going to try to do a season of the podcast and say, oh, this is the best one, everyone vote on them, tell us which one we should try to make, and go from there? Or it sounds like you had a devious thing going there.
Wow, Jim, you should be a producer or something.
Yeah, you just gave us 4 new ideas.
I'm like, okay.
You're like, yeah, we were going to do that.
We started the Filmmaker podcast for a reason.
Yeah, I like the way you think. Yeah. The deviousness came from a episode that unfortunately could not make it onto the air because of some technical difficulties, but we just had a blast thinking of this idea. I don't know if you want to unveil it yet, Zoe. Should we just hush?
Let's say it. Come on.
Okay.
Just give us a log line. You don't have to spoil the whole thing, you know?
Ooh, okay, so now we're making a log line on the spot.
Improv.
No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah.
So
have
this is, I could try.
Let's come up with a log line each.
All right. In an alternate reality where Jack the Ripper is still running the streets amok, it is not present day, but it is this time in steampunk version. There is a very sinister presence in the city, and he's, doing his thing, killing prostitutes, but our protagonist is the prostitute that got away because she found a giant mecha suit, steampunk style, and decided to scare him off. But, Jack the Ripper is that little bitch, okay? He's like, I'm gonna make my own mecha steam suit. And of course, it's not as simple as they found this giant suit. There's a scientist / inventor. There's her motives for why she's going after him, not even purely just to save herself. It's a bit of a tragic love story. And it's ridiculous enough to work possibly as a video game.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah, it's called Bloody Bronze. Essentially just fighting Jack the Ripper in a big suit, like a rig robot. Just robot Jack the Ripper, and
Yeah.
This seems like a fun video game.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
That's what we thought.
Sometimes you come up with an idea and you're like, this idea is really great, but it would work so much better if it was a book or a comic or a video game or something else. There's always potential to adapt and fly into other mediums.
I feel like people are ready for more robots on screen since Transformers has died down a bit. But
what's the series on Netflix? Is it Love, Death, and Robots? Is that it?
Love, Sex, Robots, I think. I feel like the word sex was in there.
There's a bunch of mini episodes of different stories. Every episode is different. Some of them are animated. There's a few that are live action, I think.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's almost like what's the other show that has a unique episode? Every episode is different.
There's a couple.
Black Mirror.
Yeah, it's similar to Black Mirror, but there's a lot more animation. There's one episode where there's these 3 robots, and they're thousands of years in the future. Humans are extinct, and they're wandering around trying to make sense of how the humans died. And they find this population of cats, and the cats are leading them around, and they're kind of following the cats. And then they realize the cats are super intelligent, and they basically murder everybody.
Oh, yes.
I love it.
I'm saying that as my cat is staring at me from the kitchen counter.
He's like, they've said too much.
Yeah. He's like, no.
Speaks our language, we must destroy him.
Yeah. Now he's licking the sink, so I don't know about that.
And prove he's not intelligent.
Oh, there you go.
They're dumb, so they can't catch on.
Well, I love that steampunk hunting down, fighting Jack the Ripper idea. I don't know if you guys are into video games. Are you both video gamers or no?
If we say it, then someone's gonna come up with the comments name 5 video games.
I don't know. I am such a gamer. I just bought Lego Star Wars last night, so you're talking to a real gamer.
I'm very excited for the next Breath of the Wild to come out.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that series.
It's a Legend of Zelda title.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not. A friend of mine is like, do you want to borrow my Switch because you have to play this Zelda game? I was like, I guess, sure.
That's a good friend.
She just all PlayStation.
PlayStation all the time.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
I respect it.
But there's a game that I thought of.
By The Last of Us.
Oh no, I can't. I'm hurt. I'm hurt forever by The Last of Us. It was a beautiful game, but I don't think I can play another playthrough of it. But there's a game when you're talking about Jack the Ripper that I think you guys should check out because I think style-wise it might be close to what you're thinking of.
I'm all ears.
Vampire with a Y at the end. The game, itself is okay, but the style of the game I think might be up your alley if you're looking at doing a hunting down Jack the Ripper, because it also takes place in 1918. So it's like close to around then. But
That's all up my alley.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Are there vampires in it?
Yes, so
I would hope so.
You are a doctor who was actually created by a vampire. I played at the beginning of quarantine, probably not the best game. It takes place during the 1918 pandemic. You're a doctor on the streets of London who's been turned into a vampire, and you realize that the flu pandemic is actually a vampire pandemic, and people are turning into vampires.
Oh my god, I want to play this.
Yeah.
So
This is for what system? PS4?
I think PlayStation, but PlayStation for sure, because that's what I got it on. But I'm not sure if it's available on Xbox as well. I'm not entirely sure, but I got it on PlayStation.
So cool though. It sounds like it'd make a good anime, actually.
Yeah, actually, I would say the way that they've styled like the characters, it would definitely lend itself to be a good anime. It would for sure.
So when you were describing the steampunk version of everything, I immediately started thinking of Legend of Korra.
Yes.
It's just kind of like cityscapes, but everything's like still steam engines. Like they don't have technology or electronics or anything, but they do sort of sometimes. It's a weird balance.
Like it's the time where like Asami's family is creating all these new inventions. Right. So it's like the turn of the century.
Exactly.
Yeah. Unpopular opinion, season 1 Legend of Korra is actually what got me into Avatar The Last Airbender. Like I did it backwards.
That's okay. You made it. And
thank you for accepting me.
I keep seeing this meme everywhere, and I've only watched a couple episodes of Avatar when I was babysitting because I'm a little older. I'm not going to say how old I am, but I think that the meme, it's pictures of characters from the show, and it's like people who have loved Avatar forever is one of the older characters, and people who are just getting into Avatar now, and there's like a tear streaming down their cheek of happiness.
Yeah, it's
so
such a good feeling.
It's a show that I might have to check out while in quarantine.
It will heal your soul.
Okay. That's quite the recommendation for it.
Of the regular show, and then there's 4 seasons of Legend of Korra on Netflix now. It just came out on Netflix.
Yeah, so now's the time.
Yeah, I'll check it out for sure.
Okay. So tell us, guys. We always offer a movie choice to our day players, and you guys came together and you chose The Emperor's New Groove, but then before we filmed the podcast, switched it up to Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. And
now, I have to ask, is this punishment for me changing the time of our filming last minute that you suggested this one instead?
I was so mad at you, Victoria, that I had to. No. Well, I love Emperor's New Groove. I did. The last episode that we had on Young Willing Eager was about us fighting about Marvel versus Star Wars. So I thought it would be fun to pick either a Star Wars or a Marvel movie that we could talk about. The reason I picked Attack of the Clones, I know it's not good. I am not here to change anybody's mind about this movie. It's not good. I do think Phantom Menace is worse. Anyone can come at me, but they're both bad. As a kid, I really liked this movie though, so I don't know why. And so I watched it.
You know why?
Oh, I do know why. Obi-Wan Kenobi, I mean, made me feel things, but I watched it a couple weeks ago and I was like, wow, this is really bad. And I thought for this podcast, it would be just fun to explore why I love Star Wars and most of it is great, but why is this one movie so bad? And so I just thought it would just be a fun, Star Wars movie to talk about.
I haven't watched it in a long time. I do remember disliking it. I don't remember disliking it as much as I did when I watched it last night. And I think also the last time I watched it, I was like maybe high school. So like all of like Padme's outfit changes and things like that. I loved her clothes. Her clothes were awesome, but I didn't like get the subtle like, oh, now all of a sudden she's in a corset with her breasts pushed up under her chin. Why is that necessary? Why, when that little cat Siberian tiger thing ripped the back of her shirt, did all of a sudden the full front of her shirt come off and she has a midriff showing? Like, why?
I wrote that as a note. I was so confused. I was like,
I think the reasoning for that is that her outfit at that point was so tight that it's like a rubber band snapping, and it just snapped all around in the spot.
No, I don't think there's any, like, I don't think the physics of it actually works. I don't think the physics of it actually works.
Well, Star Wars, so physics be damned. None of it works. None of it.
A lot was damned in this.
A lot was damned. The only thing that wasn't damned, there's a few good things about this movie, and I want to talk about them. It is a terrible movie, and it does hurt Star Wars a lot. But few good things. Let's talk about the positives in this movie first.
oh, sure.
Okay.
Ewan McGregor.
You brought up Daddy One Kenobi.
Oh, Daddy all the way. Oh,
He's basically
my
Jesus.
God.
He's basically Jesus. He's
Oh,
like Jesus.
I will say though, I think and I'm not a wig expert at all, or prosthetics or makeup or anything. I think his beard was fake during certain scenes. I don't know if he was filming something else or what. I think you could tell when it's fake though, because he couldn't emote with his face. And then the scenes where it wasn't fake and it was his natural beard, so he could move his face fine. Like, it's, go back and
I'm gonna go on a deep dive conspiracy hunt for this.
yeah, me too. I have to know because that
it's only
beard.
part of it. It's only through part of it. And obviously in Revenge of the Sith, it is his real beard. I don't know what he had going on. But especially when he's in the scene where he's floating, like Dooku has him trapped and he's floating around, you can definitely tell he cannot emote his face. He looks like Cher, who had too much Botox and can't move anything. And I think it's because he's afraid like his mustache is going to like fall off like while he's... But Ewan McGregor is one of the very few good things. And honestly, I think his relationship with Anakin is a little humanizing for the characters, which I think is good. I think Lucas probably went a little too far with it, but
I know we're talking about the good things about this movie, and I do agree that their relationship's super cute. Hayden Christensen, you know, God bless him, can't act for life. And so I wish, like, if it was a better actor, that relationship would have been even better. Like, I think the foundations were definitely there because Ewan McGregor's a great actor and it's great characters. I mean, you have to admit they're great. You know?
I gotta defend Hayden Christensen a little bit, not for his performance in this film, more for the fact that I think he actually is a good actor. And like Natalie Portman is a good actor. She's awful in these films.
She's so bad.
She's horrendous. Yeah. She's an Oscar winner and she's horrendous in these films. Hayden Christensen, I forget what the movie is where he plays Kevin Kline's son. Kevin Kline is like diagnosed with cancer and he goes to like rebuild this house and like rebuild his relationship with his son.
Oh, I don't know this one.
He's great in that film. He's great. And I don't know if it's like the dialogue is terrible in this film. It's really, really awful.
Can I just say on the dialogue note, the very first line was like, well, guess I was wrong. Like, whoosh. Just a huge explosion. Like, everything seems safe.
Yeah, like, some of my favorite lines of all time are from this movie. When it's all because of his read, though. The line kind of towards the end where Hayden Christensen kills that whole, you know, after he finds his mom dead, and he goes like, "I killed them." You know, and not just the men, but the women and the children. Yeah. I just, that read to me is just
slaughtered them like animals.
My favorite part of that scene is that after he confesses that he murdered a village, Natalie Portman's like, "Oh, poor baby."
She's like, not a deal breaker.
Yeah.
She's like, "I'm still in love with you." I'm like,
first of all, too, this is the first time that she showed like return on the emotion, because the whole movie he's like, "I have feelings for you. I'm into you." Like, he's coming onto her so hard.
He's so creepy.
He's like, no, we
Touching
can't.
her back. Whoa.
Women are so soft.
And this was the first time that she like returned it, and it was like, why then? Why would this point where you like just said I just murdered like 80 people?
And then at the end, or like right before they go to the pit or the Coliseum thing, she's like, I've been dying every day since you came back. I love you. I'm like, what? Why is that? You're dying every day? What? That means you love him? Oh my god.
I think it's honestly LucasArts and the writing, because these aren't bad actors, and there's so much talent in this movie. Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, they're just
Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee. We gotta talk about Christopher Lee.
One of our best actors of all time, Dracula, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Truthfully, it is all about how, I don't know if a man or a woman wrote Padme in this, but if I had to guess, it was a man, because there was quite simply no universe. I know this is science fiction, but there's no universe in where a woman would feel these feelings for this guy who's like making her uncomfortable, like always horny, like no chill, and then slaughters everybody. And that's when she's like, yeah, now I'm feeling it.
You know what I think the problem is too, is that Anakin in this movie, when they first met in the Phantom Menace, he was like, maybe 9 years old. Yeah. So in this movie, 10 years later, he's supposed to be like 19, and he's been hanging out with only Ewan McGregor for like 10 years. So he's got to be the most suppressed, like horny teenager.
I know. He's basically like an incel.
But he's also like the most powerful being in the universe.
Wait, just going back on that. He is an incel. I mean, he turns into Darth Vader, for God's sake. That's like the most incel thing you can do. Is turn into Darth Vader.
But he does end up with the girl, so clearly pussy didn't solve anything.
At what cost?
But that just goes into the whole stupid Hollywood narrative about how women just want damaged men. And like, no. And she's supposed to be this strong, powerful senator who, she's intelligent, and she does the right thing and all this stuff, and she's independent. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, this whiny teenager. And I'm wondering if that's like the direction that Lucas wanted him to take with it, was like to be a whiny teenager. And that's why it is so whiny and like, and bad, and it makes the lines worse. And how could she fall for that? And especially when the last time she saw him, he was 9 years old. How old was she? What, she's 16 in that movie, in Phantom Menace? She's supposed to be 16 years old?
Something like that.
And so that line when she's like, I've been dying a little day ever since you came back into my life, like, sounds a little creepy, being like, did you have a history with him when he was 9 years old? Like, it sounds creepy.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they could have, though, because he was taken away to the Jedi. But she might have been thinking about him. I mean, who knows?
But last time she remembered him, he was a little kid. Like, what are you thinking about then? Like,
and then he slides back into her life like, I'm grown now. I'm grown. Check me out, girl, because I'm grown. He says grown up like 5 times.
And if they say Annie, they say Annie so many times. It's like, take a drink every time they say Annie. It's insane.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem for me is I'm watching the whole movie going, this is Darth Vader. This is the most awesome villain of all time, or at least in the top 5 most cool villains ever. And I'm like, he hates sand? Like, what are you talking about?
I love that line too.
And it's rough, and it gets everywhere. And I'm like, you're not a beach, dude. You're standing on a boardwalk with grass around you. There's not even sand nearby.
And he grew up on Tatooine. Isn't that all sand? Did you just have the worst childhood of all time then?
I think basically anything that's ever happened to Anakin Skywalker, like, traumatized him. And then, like, the Tusken Raiders always bothers him. And I knew this too, because I'm a huge nerd, as you can see. I'm rocking the Chewbacca shirt. I read the comics and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
In the comics too, Darth Vader, like, even years ahead, like, when he's actually Darth Vader, he sees, like, a group of Tusken Raiders, It has nothing to do with his mission, what he's currently working on or whatever. And he just is like, I'm going to go slaughter that village too, because these are the types of people that killed my mom. So.
And when you were talking about what I found to be very good about this movie, I actually felt his mother's death was very strong in his character development. It would be stronger if you watched the first one, but even if you're someone who just went into this movie, no context on his relationship with his mother, you can sense that they were close and that this was really surprising and heartbreaking for him.
I agree with you, but I also feel like that whole moment was undercut by her actual moment of death, where she just literally is like, Anakin, you grew up so handsome. And it was just, every time that I'm like, oh, that's a bit of a redeeming part of the story, they like snap me back and I'm like, that's so bad.
I'm like, she didn't need to die that dramatic, but at the same time, taking the acting away, the writing there was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, if you actually look at the story as a whole isn't bad. The story itself isn't bad. It's when they changed from story to an actual script with dialogue that all of a sudden it got crappy. Like it, I think it's, the idea behind it is fine, but the portrayal of Anakin as this whiny, horny teenager is awful. And there are huge plot holes with like, how on earth do you not, like, you can feel him slaughtering a whole village, but you can't figure out that Count Dooku's working with a Sith Lord who's running the...
Well, Victoria froze, but...
It don't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't all go together. Oh, I froze?
A little.
You're
Did
back now. You're good.
But
Sorry.
also, just going off that too, like Palpatine, how do they not know? I mean, he's
Right.
just...
Well, the thing is, at this point, audience members know who Palpatine is because they know from the previous films. But in Star Wars lore, there's the light side of the Force and the dark side. It's basically like an electrical connection, and they cancel each other out. So the dark side is, every time the light side goes to try to like see things with the Force, the dark side's just repelling it. And that's how powerful Palpatine is he's just kind of like blocking all of their chi, if that makes any sense.
But then Yoda can go up to Count Dooku and say, the dark side I sense in you, like,
Yeah.
they can't sense the dark side, like...
Maybe it's like a bad smell. They're like, oh, this guy smells kind of stinky, I guess. Maybe he's part of the dark side.
Maybe it's something to do with the proximity in which they were, like, they were far away, now they're together now. He's like, oh, it's obvious. You're just giving me, like, a bad vibe, dude. Like,
I'm sensing really bad vibes. You have a bad aura.
you might want to, like, see this lady I go to for that.
I don't know. They're in a meeting at one point in the very beginning of the movie.
Dooku there?
And Palpatine. And
No, just Palpatine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, Yoda kind of gives him side-eye, though. He's kind of, like, suspicious of Palpatine. So I think he knows something's up, but he doesn't quite know. But for us that know, we as audience members know, we're like, come on, pick up on it.
Yoda,
Right.
come on!
I just think that the movie really suffered from a lack of, like, clear protagonists. Like, Anakin was supposed to be the protagonist, but he spent most of the time trying to, like, recite bad poems to Amidala, and, like, Obi-Wan was actually on these missions, but it was, like, kind of slower paced, and then instead of, like, really, like, pumping up, like, Anakin's storylines, we got, like, CG battles that were 10 minutes too long.
Yes,
So long.
thank you. Yes.
So long.
So much of this film was just spectacle and not substance. And like the whole scene when they go to rescue Obi-Wan and they're in the droid manufacturing facility, that took way too long. And he tried to shoehorn in all of this comedy with C-3PO. And the funny bits about C-3PO in like the previous films in the original trilogy, they're few and far between. Here's a little funny thing that he says here, and then he doesn't say anything for the rest of the time. But this whole sequence with him with his head being on a droid body and his body having a droid head.
The
Like,
sequence was way too long.
it was so much. It was
There's
so
a reason.
much.
There's a reason that this sequence exists and that it was like 10, 15 minutes long.
Why?
Because in Disneyland, at the time of this movie coming out, they made a roller coaster where you would go through the ride of that scene and like you're in it. So the whole scene was developed and made longer so that people would say, I want to see that in real life and go to this roller coaster.
Wow, capitalism.
Yeah, that's why amusement parks shouldn't be in charge of making movies.
Yes.
No, like you can't make a movie based off of like the idea that you have for a ride. If there's a ride already there, like Pirates of the Caribbean, and you made a movie, there's no storyline, there's no through line. You're just like, oh, let's call it Pirates of the Caribbean and we'll blah, 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 blah. Like, that's fine. But, like, you can't be like, let's add this scene into the movie so we can make money at this theme park. Like, that doesn't...
No. Which is such a shame because C-3PO is one of my favorite characters. I always love a good C-3PO cameo in anything. So it's a shame to see him do something that's, like, kind of lame and just, like, for going on for so long. Like, have him be part of the story then a little bit then and have the comedy in that.
I also just got confused how the lightsaber, Anakin's lightsaber, just got like yeeted in half, like by some sort of like mechanical. I get like it's a production line they were trapped in, but like, can lightsabers be cut in half by anything other than a lightsaber?
I guess.
Lightsabers, the hilt of the light. This is my inner nerd really shining today.
No, I was asking you, Jim. I knew you had the answer.
The hilt of a lightsaber is basically just a chunk of metal.
But it cut off at the blue blade, the energy blade.
Yes. So, I mean, there's no energy blade in the handle. You have to turn it on. There's a button. So, like, it's actually activated. So, like, this Pringles can is my lightsaber. If I press a button here, the laser starts here and goes out.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's no laser within the actual handle itself. So, I mean...
It's created by a crystal that they have to...
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Basically, Jedis, when they're young, and they're, like, going through the trial of, like... There's, like, a trial you go through to earn your lightsaber. And they do this when they're, like, 7. They're super young. That's why there was a whole thing with, in the first movie, Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan was like, but he's so young, we can't take on this weird little kid. He's already too old for the whole Jedi training. You're supposed to do it from like birth. But the lightsabers have little crystals in them that the rest of the hilt activates and forces light through it. And that's kind of how a lightsaber works.
So, okay, it's plausible, but then tell me why those little robots that were going, Roger, Roger, in the first one are like nailing Jedi dead in that big battle in the Colosseum. They killed so many Jedi, and they're supposed to be like bad, useless droids.
I mean, like in the 6th movie, like Ewoks killing stormtroopers with rocks. I mean, anything goes in these movies, I feel like.
The idea is just that there's so many robots that it overwhelms. You know what it is really important to acknowledge is that this movie, as well as the next one, kind of sit together, and Phantom Menace is kind of in its own weird bubble, I feel like, personally, just because of the huge jump in time that they do during those movies. Because it's like this movie exists, and then there's a whole 10-year gap, and then these next 2 movies kind of fit together. But in between Episode 2 and Episode 3, there's a whole 7-season show that they did for the Clone Wars. And that show is incredible. That show, it takes
really
all the stupid crap about the 2 movies and kind of like legitimizes some of it and highlights all the good stuff. Does a really good job of doing all that. So
I used to watch that show. I can't believe I stopped, but I remember liking it a lot.
They came back last year to kind of wrap it up and do a final season.
Yeah. And it's
so good.
It's really good in how they fill in all the gaps. And you almost wish that, like, instead of doing a trilogy with these films, he would have taken the time to like make a series out of them or something where he could really tell the story. He could take his time with any of these, you know, these inaccuracies that don't match with the original 4 that he made, he could really take his time with it. But George Lucas, I think, when he got to this film, just felt like, I'm George Lucas, I can do anything I want. And that's what he did.
Yeah, and he loved the CGI, obsessed with just making... And he even went back into the original trilogy and added CGI scenes, which are insane. I hate that. It's like I can't even watch New Hope, really, because of that one CGI scene they added.
The funny thing is, like, Lord of the Rings came out right around the same, that trilogy came out right around the same time as, like, Phantom Menace came out in, like, 99, and then this came out in 2002, and, like, Fellowship of the Ring came out in, like, 2001. And if you look, like, yes, Lord of the Rings used a crap ton of CGI, but that holds up because they also balance it with practical stuff. Like when Padme fell out of the transport into the sand after the Colosseum fight, that was the fakest looking thing I've ever seen in my life. And when she stands up with the stormtrooper guy, you can see her feet moving on the sand that they were CGIing underneath her.
Oh no.
It's like, why? Like,
my favorite thing too regarding the CGI is that they never once, and this was like a huge thing, they were trying to figure out why they could never find costume props for all the clone troopers. And it's because not one clone trooper in their armor was real. Every single one of them is CGI. And it's just like, really? You didn't even have like one costume made? You're LucasArts. You would make a costume. No, not a one.
My whole thing about it is that in the Colosseum, the monsters that they like set out to kill them looked like the monsters from Spy Kids 2.
They did.
And so that's the level it was on. And then even on top of that, the most unrealistic thing is like Amidala like leaps off of like a platform and lands like crotch first onto the back of one of these beasts. And then she like gives Anakin a sweet kiss and they ride off. I was like, she would have broke her badge. She would have.
Right? Thank you.
Also giving him a kiss. You're just leave.
I can't.
many points of
there's also like
realism I couldn't
Jedi
suspend.
all around, right? So all the Jedi have to, at least one of them had to be like, saw that.
Right? When she's coming in after he gets his arm cut off and Dooku gets away, she just shouts Annie and runs into him and like throws her arms around him and like, did nobody? Like, I know Obi-Wan either knows or severely is suspicious of all of this, especially when he was like, land the craft, we have to get her. It's just
Right, he has to know.
Yeah. It's too
Yeah.
much.
Well, it's crazy because if you watch the Clone Wars TV show, he doesn't know the whole time until the very last season of the show where he kind of like starts picking up on stuff where Anakin goes off privately to have a weird conversation with somebody. He doesn't know who, but he's just phoning Padme. And then it really just showed, it like filled in all the gaps. You guys should watch that because it'll make these movies better, if possible.
You know, I got Disney Plus. I'll be on that.
Yeah.
Wasn't he like flirting with Ahsoka in the beginning though?
Who?
Anakin.
No, Ahsoka's like 6 when they meet.
In the Clone Wars.
Well, I hope not, because she's like
He's a
7.
child Padawan at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
They always have
I'm misremembering.
they have a very brother-sister relationship where it's like, you're my older brother, kind of. So they kind of joke around with each other and have fun. But I don't think it's flirty at any point.
Yeah.
There's a lot I don't remember about that show, and there's a lot I want to forget about this movie.
Well, you watch the Clone Wars series, and I will watch Avatar, and we'll chat about it.
Deal.
Recap
Well-
coming soon.
Yes. Well, Victoria, Zoe, thank you so much for coming on, talking about your podcast. We'll be sharing all of your information so that people can keep up with you as you finish out your grad school degrees. We can keep up with all the projects you have coming up, and people can tune into your podcast as well.
Yay, thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. It was our pleasure.
And if you guys want to check out our podcasts, we are available on youngwillingeagerpod.com. Also on Instagram, Twitter, hopefully TikTok, we'll see. And
We got like 40 days left. We'll see.
yeah, before,
We gotta get them in.
So yeah, thank you guys for having us. This has been a blast.
No
Absolutely.
problem. Hey guys, so the goal of the Astoria Filmmakers Club is to help filmmakers in the area produce their own original work and make films that we can all enjoy. The best way to show support of this is to make a donation, big or small, to the club.
Your donations will go directly towards the club, this podcast, and any future productions that the AFC takes on.
Just scan the QR code below, and it will bring you directly to the club's official Venmo page. You can make any size donation you want, and we would really appreciate it. It will go directly towards us and towards members of the club, and they can make cool videos and content and films, and we just love your support. Please show your support and make a donation today. All right, well, big thank you to Zoë and Victoria for coming on the podcast. Definitely check out their show, Young, Willing, Eager Podcast. It seems like they have a really cool creative outlet. I've never really seen something like that, too, with the improv, creativity, screenwriting. I've never also I took a screenwriting course, but there was no, like, improv portion of it. It wasn't like we have to come up with something together as a group right now, here and now. And they put a time limit on themselves. It was more like a teacher gave me an assignment and I just did it. You know, it wasn't, they're having a more fun way of doing it, which I think is really cool.
And I think that screenwriters, you know, anyone who's involved in the creative process at all should take an improv class. I think it's important. It helps you think on your feet. It helps you, you know, figure out better ways to get over those mental blocks. I remember when I was an acting apprentice down at a theater in Florida, we would teach acting and improv to the animation students at, what is that place called? It's a really big college down in Florida. Is it Barnum? It's not Barnum. Ringling College of Art and Design. I knew it was named after a circus person. It was Ringling College of Art and Design. A lot of their animators go on to like work with like Pixar, DreamWorks, all that stuff. So we would teach them, you know, acting and improv to kind of get them to figure out how, you know, if they're in a room by themselves, like animating for 8 hours and they need inspiration for like how this character would react to something, you know, how to do it. I think it's really useful. So podcasts like that, definitely good for them to stretch their muscles while they're waiting to start the next semester back up.
While they're waiting to allowed to be outside again,
Right.
thanks to COVID. But they did choose a horrible movie. And by I had such a love-hate relationship with this movie because I love Star Wars and I love a lot of parts of this movie. But let's talk Star Wars Attack of the Clones. Let's get into more of the nitty-gritty of it. We did talk about it quite a bit already with them. But let's talk about the actual story structure. It's basically, there's no way to sum it up in a sentence.
No, because there's so much going on and it feels very much like, it feels like two separate movies. Like they don't transition between.
Only two? I feel like
Well,
there's movies happening in this movie.
yeah, I mean, there are, but like it doesn't really transition well between like Obi-Wan and his missions and Anakin and his mission to protect Padme. Like it doesn't, they're not cohesive. They don't work well together. Like, and the entire time that he's protecting Padme, it's just, you know, fuel for their love story or how, you know,
Yeah.
how Luke and Leia came to be kind of a thing. And there's nothing more like, so every time you cut back to them, it's just more of this awkward non-sexual tension that they're trying to pass off as sexual tension. I don't know. And then Obi-Wan's journey is also very like jumpy. I feel like they spent so much time in this film on the spectacle of it, of like the long ass chase that they had at the beginning through Coruscant took way too long. That was so long. The 10 plus minute sequence in the droid factory where they're making that, the super long fight at the end in the Coliseum when the other Jedi show up, and then when the clones show up with Yoda. All of that took so long that they didn't have the time in this film, because it's over 2 hours. They didn't have the time in this film to really expand on the story-driven elements of it, and that's what we needed. That's what we needed for this to make sense.
Yeah,
and
I feel like too, because you put a cap on the amount of shit you're gonna shove in your movie.
Yeah,
and it lets you focus in on the things that really matter. So like The Mandalorian, there's like 4 main characters really. It's The Mandalorian, little baby Yoda, and like everybody else. Like some people, there's like 2 or 3 additional people that keep recurring or keep coming back, but it's really a show about them two and their relationship and what they're trying to go out and do. In this movie, you have, Obi-Wan Kenobi and his journey, and that's separate from Anakin and his journey, but it's still connected to Padme and her journey, and then Palpatine, and we know he's got a whole story. And then there's also Mace Windu. Samuel L. Jackson's walking around being a badass too. Yoda's there. Jar Jar Binks is a senator. Like, it's just, it's so nonsensical at certain points that you're like, what year is this? Like, by the end of the movie, I tried to remember the beginning of the movie, and it took me a minute to be like, oh yeah, there were assassination attempts on Padme, and that's how this all started.
mm-hmm.
Which I want to point out something, is that Palpatine ordered the assassination of Senator Amidala, right? Because he's the top of the totem pole. So he said she needs to die.
Right.
Count Dooku, to carry out the assassination. Count Dooku then hires a bounty hunter named Jango Fett to carry out that assassination, who then hires another bounty hunter who's a shapeshifter to carry out that assassination, who then gets a robot to kill her. And then the robot uses these weird centipede bugs to kill her. And none of it works. And they stop the bugs, and Anakin and Obi-Wan sense the bugs. So they it's just like they went all the way down the totem pole to the point where it's like 7 degrees of separation from, you could have just like shown up and killed her, Palpatine. Just do it, bro. Like,
I mean, when you say it like that, like 7 degrees of separation, maybe that was the plan, to keep him as distant from it so no one can sense what it actually is, and if the assassination attempt doesn't work. But like, you didn't explain that anywhere in this, so it just seems convoluted and dumb.
yeah.
Like, it seems unnecessarily complicated.
It was an excuse to show different forms of CGI. And they wanted to show a shapeshifter that didn't really shapeshift all that much. And he's
like, why, if it's a shapeshifter, why didn't they shapeshift when they got away from them? Like, when they got away from Obi-Wan and Anakin, why did the shapeshifter not change from the woman that Anakin saw?
You're asking questions that they don't need answers, all right?
No.
These are questions that you shouldn't ask, because they will never have answers.
But it was so much spectacle. But then my other argument is that they didn't use the spectacle where it was needed, for as long as it was needed. I was really mad when I first watched this, way back when, never seen it before, that they changed Yoda from a puppet to CGI. You get to the end of the film and you realize he's got a lightsaber fight, and you can't do that with a puppet. So yes, this makes sense. The fight with Yoda was probably one of the most badass parts of this whole film, and it lasted like 2 minutes. Like, you spent 10 minutes on C-3PO walking around, like, yeah. Are you kidding? You don't get to see Yoda fight ever, because, and now you finally get to see it.
Yoda's so cool. That honestly, I was like, I remembered that fight. That was one of the few things that I like really recalled from this movie. Mm-hmm. And I was waiting for it. And because of this movie, and also the next one, episode 3, they're so tied together in such a way that I was like, I don't remember. Does that happen in this movie or the next movie? because Yoda basically has the same moment when he fights Palpatine. He walks out with the cane, he waddles in, and then he pulls the lightsaber out from his hilt with the Force, and then just pwns the guy, destroys him, and it's the most badass shit. So see, I love that part of the movie, and I like CGI Yoda. It was a little rocky, not gonna lie. The CGI, like, you could tell, but it's Yoda. You can do no wrong with Yoda. But Count Dooku too, Christopher Lee, another standout in this movie, another amazing part of it. Jango Fett, I think, was also, this was his first appearance, and I thought he was really cool, really badass, and kind of complex and interesting. He's got all this weird stuff going on with the clones. That actor, too, I'm going to point out, is coming back to Star Wars. He's going to be in The Mandalorian Season 2, and some people are debating who he's playing.
I think on IMDb it actually says Jango Fett, but I don't think that's right because he got eaten by the creature in the Sarlacc pit.
When you clone someone 1,000,000 times, he can literally be like 80 characters. So
that's true, but
to see that so much.
That's true, but you also have to think they're not making any more clones at this point. They have people who have volunteered to fight for the Empire or have been volunteered by the Empire to be a part of it at this point because The Mandalorian takes place right after Return of the Jedi before the most recent trilogy.
People are saying too, because they're also, the bigger rumor is that Ahsoka Tano is going to be in Mandalorian Season 2. And she's going to be played by Rosario Dawson, also very cool. So the big idea is that, not to spoil the end of the Clone Wars series.
Spoiler, turn it off if you haven't watched it.
Doesn't really spoil too much, but her and Captain Rex, one of the more famous or notorious clones, they go off together at the very end to just kind of escape the situation that they're caught in. So a lot of people are thinking maybe this actor's coming back because he's now a little older as well. Maybe he's going to portray Captain Rex because it's about the age range he would be if they aged a little bit. You know, beard out to here, white beard, and looking all cool. And I'd love to see that. But let's keep the convo on this movie, because the good things about Star Wars, we gotta just remember that they're not happening in this movie. There's Jango Fett, Yoda, Count Dooku. I still think Samuel L. Jackson, he's still one of the great parts of Star Wars. He's like unique in that way. The purple lightsaber thing, which, have you ever heard that story as to why his...
Yes, but please repeat it in case anyone listening hasn't heard this story, because it's awesome.
Samuel L. Jackson said, hey, there's this mega battle at the end where I'm going to be running around with a lightsaber. How am I going to know in all the wide shots where I am? And George Lucas was like, I don't know. What do you mean? You're over here. You're going to be that guy in the crowd over there. It's like, yeah, but I want to be able to see myself. So he said to George Lucas, can I have a different colored lightsaber? And he's like, well, evil is red, good is blue or green. So he's like, I want purple. Like, okay. So they gave him a purple lightsaber. That was it. That was the reason.
I mean, do you say no to Samuel L. Jackson? I don't think you do.
Yeah, well, you did. No one has yet. I'm pretty sure that basically he said, I want a purple lightsaber. And then they were like, you know what? That's kind of interesting. Why not?
I mean, he's one of the leads in the council, so why not? He can be different.
They basically explain later that the purple lightsaber is extremely rare because it's the crystal that forms the lightsaber. So it's either that you find this extremely rare crystal and it's only it's almost like finding a wand in Harry Potter where it's like it chooses you as much as you choose it. But it's only something that extremely powerful Jedi find. Or it's when you find a red Star Wars crystal, like an evil lightsaber, essentially, that has been used by a Sith Lord, and you purify it. And that might turn it purple. But that's also extremely rare. Another case of that is Ahsoka Tano, being this weirdly cool and balanced character within the Force, took 2 lightsabers from a Sith Lord, purified them, and they turned white. Also interesting. But, you know, that's also not in this movie. So these are cool things that are happening in Star Wars, not in this movie. What else was good about this movie? Almost nothing with Anakin. The thing with his mom was like done pretty well, and then nothing Natalie Portman did. I was like, none of this makes sense. She stood up for herself at first. He was like openly flirting with her, coming onto her super strong, and she was like, "Nah, bro, chill." But then at the end of the movie, she was flipped the script, and it was like, really? So all that confident woman stuff was just nonsense to you?
I mean, I don't, to give her the benefit of the doubt on that one, you know, it's probably easy in the beginning when you only spent, 5 minutes with him, you know, with your love interest, this will be fine. Like, yes, I find him attractive or whatever have you, but it'll be fine. But then as they spend more time together, it gets harder and harder for her to fight that off. But their whole romance doesn't make sense. And it's so cheesy when they roll around in the field and she goes running through the field in her dress and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just...
I want to talk about how people laugh in this movie. Because it's like over the top. Like, so there's the part 2, totally separate part, where Jango and Boba Fett, young Boba Fett, they're flying around in the ship and they're shooting at Obi-Wan Kenobi. And they're like, yeah, let's shoot him. Let's get him. We're going to get him. And Jango says something along the lines of like, he won't be coming back from that. And Boba Fett literally goes, ha, 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 ha. And I was like, dude, what? Like, it was just so over the top and weird and cheesy. And I was just like, bro.
That's this whole film, though.
That's
this whole film is just over the top, cheesy, and it looked really a lot like they were just trying to like shoehorn things in so that they could round it out by the time they get to the third one. You know, of how do Luke and Leia get born? Okay, he has a relationship with Padme. There we go. How, I mean, I don't know what the rest of the movies, I guess how the stormtroopers came to be, and how the Jedi likes trying to, you're right, they are very interconnected, the second movie and the third movie. So it's...
Stormtroopers are just basically people that are drafted, because after they basically say, we're not going to make any more clones, it's, then the war still happens. So they are like, we need people to fight the war. That's where they start drafting people and having people come join the cause and fight the war and become stormtroopers. And they're basically choosing, this is the rationale as to why stormtroopers have such bad aim. It's because they're farmers. They're like random people from across the universe. They're random people that have never been warriors or fighters or anything. And they're so rapidly being picked out of their lives and said, hey, here's a gun, go fight in our war. So they're bad at aiming. They have no training. The clone troopers are trained from the time that they're born to be awesome soldiers. And if you watch the Star Wars Clone Wars series, you see a lot of their evolutions and it all clicks into place much more. But it also kind of manipulates how long these movies are apart. Because Clone Wars, they don't really put a timestamp on stuff, but it seems like it takes place over the course of there's 7 seasons, so maybe it's 7 years. So there is a bit of a gap between these two movies, but I don't know, it feels like they're super connected as opposed to the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, that does feel like its own separate thing. Because it is, 10 years between that movie and this movie.
Yeah.
But
there's just a CGI gap for the most part, because I think they found a lot more ways to do CGI stuff for those 2 movies than they did for the Phantom Menace. But
yeah, but well, it missed the mark, and it kind of paved the way for more movies within the strict Skywalker canon to miss the mark. The best things about Star Wars are when they kind of go off away from the actual Skywalker epic. When they get away from that, specifically, even if it's just a little offshoot, they do better. Like
Yeah.
Rogue One, awesome film. Doesn't specifically have to do with the Skywalkers at all. That's awesome.
I mean, let's save Rogue One for another day. I could fight you on that a little bit, that it's a great movie. It's an okay movie. I would argue that Solo, the Han Solo movie that they did, the spinoff there, is far better than Rogue One. But we're not talking about those movies.
No,
But-
we're not.
Back to the
Well,
club.
I think what we should do is probably end it now because we could literally go on and on. We could just offshoot into, well, this movie was awesome and this movie sucked and this movie. We could literally do what that video you talked about earlier was about. How we're not really fans of Star Wars, but we are.
Before we do go, I want to talk about some of the little things about Star Wars, because obviously it was a huge, massive success because it's such a huge franchise. The budget for this film was $115 million, which was a lot. I think the expectations for this movie were super high. And at box office, it brought in $653.8 million. So it more than multiplied its money by 6. Also, too, they have like Disneyland, or not even Disneyland. I don't think at the time it was connected with Disney, but they had rides at parks and stuff, and they had, shirts and clothing, and I forget what
Merchandise.
toys, things like that. Everything. They made so much money off of these movies, even though people were like, these are bad movies. They still bought.
You're still going to see them. You're still going to see them. It's a Star Wars movie. You're still going to see it.
I think Star Wars is one of those things that like they could keep cranking out bad movies and it's going to be financially successful. So that's almost a crutch that kills Star Wars. You remember in The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises where Bane says, "Victory has defeated you." And Batman, then he snaps Batman's spine. This is that. They are so successful that they know they don't have to try, and then they fail.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it needs more failure in the Star Wars universe to make them decide that they need to really give the creative power to the filmmakers. X-Men went through this, and then their big comeback was Logan. And then they were like, see, we give creative people the control that they should have. Don't have the studio, LucasArts, George Lucas adding 16 more laser beams just cause. And it will shine. And I think Mandalorian is Star Wars' Logan. And that it's, it's on the rise. There's still going to be bad X-Men movies and bad Star Wars movies. But I think there will also be great ones. So.
Yeah. I can't fight you on that. That's true.
And on that note.
There you go. And on that note,
Tuning into the AFC podcast. We appreciate you guys coming out. We want to thank our day players as well, Zoe and Victoria, for coming on, talking to us about the Young, Willing, Eager podcast and all the other projects that they've been involved in and things they've done. Victoria, where can people find us?
well, I believe people can find us on YouTube if they'd like to see our lovely faces. They can also listen to us on the go on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Castbox.
Yes, well, on behalf of the Astoria Filmmakers Club podcast, I am Jim Galizia.
And I'm Victoria Fragnito. We'll see you guys next time.
Welcome to the AFC Podcast.
My name is Jim Galizia.
My name is Victoria Fragnito.
Today we're going to have our day player,
Phil Capadora.
Tim Dowd.
Nora Berman.